Welcome, Mr. Dave Coldwell, as Adi Oladipo and I do every week. What have you been up to in the last week?
Mate, it's just been deciphering all the controversy in the boxing, catching up on all that. I've done quite a bit of media work and training the fighters in the gym. That's my life. Football with my son, that is my life. So pretty much every week's the same, although this week has been an extra when it comes down to controversy and talking points in the sport.
Absolutely right. It really has. For my part, I was at the London press conference. I thought Chris Eubank was outstanding once more. I missed the egg gate because I was too tired after Hong Kong and Riyadh to get up to Manchester for an evening press conference. I was in the talkSPORT studio on Saturday night, doing the broadcast and hosting it for our watch along from the BIC, the Bournemouth International Centre, where Ryan Garner put on a tremendous performance in his victory to win the European Super Featherweight Championship against the undefeated Spaniard Jimenez. I thought it was a terrific fight. We had Spencer and Adam Smith down there doing commentary and Duke McKenzie in the studio with me. We had a big chat about heavyweights as well. But like you say, there's so much going on. I came home from talkSPORT on the Saturday night, watched the Crocker Donovan, then watched Tank Davies, and then slept most of Sunday because I don't think I'd had a wink of sleep for a couple of days. Some controversies to get into then, David. Tank Davies takes a knee against Lamont Roach in the 9th round to wipe grease from his face and ultimately ends up drawing the fight and losing his perfect record. Obviously, he's 30-1 with 28 knockouts, one draw that is, with 28 knockouts. Have you ever seen anything quite like it?
No, I think if I remember right, I think Mayweather busted his hand or something and took a knee way back when he was Pretty Boy Floyd. I think if I'm right, and I do think he got a count for that. I might be wrong, but other than that, I've never seen anything like that. It was very, very strange. It was you would expect it from a novice and an inexperienced fighter to do something like that. Not from Gervonta Tank Davies.
I remember being at the Victor Ortiz fight with Floyd, and Victor headbutted him out of frustration at one point early in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And as the referee brought them together again after, I think, deducting a point from Victor, or certainly warning him at the time, it might have been a points deduction, Victor went to fist bump with Floyd as if to apologise, and Floyd hit him with a 1-2 and knocked him out, if you recall, or knocked him down and out. That was one of those kind of moments where normal service wasn't resumed. I think, for me, apart from the fact that Tank Davies was subdued and very sluggish in the fight, not what we're used to seeing from him. Good performance from Lamont Roach. Steve Willis, I think, was as surprised as us, and it kind of caught him off guard.
I agree with you.
Things here. He could and maybe should have deducted a point for taking the knee, because you can't call a timeout yourself as a fighter, can you? And secondarily, he could have disqualified him. You know this. You work the corner. Putting your head outside the ropes and getting your head dealt with in the middle of a round is just not permissible. He could have disqualified him for that. And as a result, he could have lost the bout that was drawn on 2 cards and was a 15-13 on the other. So in many ways, did he get away with it?
Oh, 100% he got away with it. Whatever the reason is, you cannot take a knee without a count. The minute you take a knee, that's a count. That's it. And like you say, I mean, you can go in hard on the ref if you want, but it was because it wasn't like he got caught with a big blow and then he can say, oh, he's bluffing and he's trying to buy time. There was nothing in there. There was an innocuous jab, I think, that flicked him in the eye. He takes a little step back and then just casually walks off as though you're in a sparring session and the bell's gone and you just walk back to your corner. It was a strange thing. So I think you can forgive the ref for being a little bit perplexed and confused and thinking, wait, what's going on here? And completely forgetting. But then again, you got to think, it is actually his job to enforce the rules. And so therefore, Tank got away with one because he should have got a count. And as you said, that swings the result of the fight in Roach's favour.
It was definitely acting like the AA side, and maybe referee
Yeah.
Willis bought into it. But that is the ephemera that people like Tank Davis has. He does have an aura, whatever anyone says. He initially said he's not taking the rematch with Roach. It looks like he may have changed his mind. Should he run it back in your view?
100%. I hope so. I hope so because listen, I'm I'm a big fan of Tank. I'm a big fan, but also as a big fan who understands that he's not just people just see him as raw power and exciting, but he's such a clever fighter. He's so intelligent. His ring IQ is fantastic. His setups are amazing. I love the package of Tank. I love where he's come from. I love the story. I think he's one of those few fighters in the game now where he has this aura of he's going to knock you out and he can turn your lights out at any moment. So I am also disappointed. Running alongside the being a fan of his comes the disappointment in how his career's evolving. I don't feel as though he's had the fights and that we want to see him in, the big super fights. And you look at him the other night, he looked like a fighter that's bored with it all. He looked like a fighter he just couldn't be bothered. He's just not motivated. And I think he needs that big fight. Now, maybe this gives him a little bit of a rocket because some people had Roach winning. Obviously, the fight's a draw. It takes away his perfect record. Maybe that gives him the spite to go into a rematch and go. Because even when he was letting go of these shots, it was like sparring shots. It was like sparring. It wasn't. Tank's very, very vicious, and he's always looking to take you out, especially when he goes to work. But he also looked really shocked when Roach had fired back at him. I mean, Roach caught him with a good counter shot, and the surprise on his face as if to say, how dare you do that? I think he needs to check himself and get back mentally in the game.
I regretted staying up till 4:30. It's one of those moments when you stay up all night. You get home at 1:30 from the radio show, make yourself a couple of coffees, and stay up and catch up with everything else. I caught up with Donovan and Crocker, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I was really disappointed exactly that because I just think it didn't look like Tank. Obviously, we know he has some issues outside the ring. He's in and out of children's homes growing up. There's a person in that first series of The Wire based on him and his family in Baltimore. He had a very, very unusual upbringing. And he does have these swings into kind of nihilism and madness at times. And,
Yeah.
and he can be his own worst enemy. And I think, like you say, when you see someone listless and bored and sluggish and subdued like that, when you know how good they are, because for me, he belongs in the top 10 pound for pound in the world, although the Ring Magazine panel think maybe he doesn't right now because of that. But I've been trying to remind everyone, Yuriorkis Gamboa, since 2019, and mate, you tell me whether you're dissatisfied or not. Since 2019, Gamboa, I'll give their records as well, 30-2, one wins by TKO. Leo Santa Cruz, 37-1-1, wins by a brilliant KO, if you recall. Mario Barrios was 26-0, he won by TKO. Isaac Cruz, Pitbull Cruz, was 22-1-1, he won by UD. Rolly Romero was 14-0. Hector Garcia was 16-0. Ryan Garcia was 23-0. They were all TKOs and KOs. Frank Martin, 18-0 KO, and Lamont Roach, 25-1, and he wins. Or he wins a draw, if you like. I mean, does that record, there should be a Shako Stevenson on there, should be a Vasyl Lomachenko, there should be the likes of Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney on there, in my view. Should he, even though they're slightly bigger in weight, because he is a pound for pound star, does that record flatter to deceive a little bit?
Up to and including the Garcia fight, I haven't got a problem, and I feel as though the excitement levels after the Garcia fight, because obviously Garcia was a superstar in himself as well in his own right, in terms of reach and mainstream coverage and fan base. on the back of that, that's what I thought he was gonna be catapulted and into superstardom. The numbers were amazing. The fight delivered. The knockout was great at the end. You got everything there, and I thought then we was gonna get him in the big fights, the name fights, and really propel himself. But how long ago is that fight? And he's had 2 fights against, unless you're I don't like to use the word purist, but unless you know boxing, you don't know who Frank Martin is, and you don't know who Lamont Roach is. They're not the names that you want to see him in with someday. Because you got to remember now, Tank Davis isn't a young kid anymore. He's past that stage. This is where it's about somebody that's got this ability and that's done what he's done in his career. It's about getting those big marquee fights where you're reaching out to create some sort of legacy for when you're done.
Yeah.
Right now, as we are right now, after Saturday night, after his previous fight, if Tank Davis, he spoke about retiring, he spoke about he's done with the sport, he's looking at retirement. If Tank Davis retires right now, I would look at that career and say, despite what he's achieved, what a waste. And I would think, how disappointed and kind of like flat I'm left with that career.
Yeah.
And now people might say that's crazy because look at the amount of world titles he's won, different division. But the talent that man has got, the excitement that man delivers when he's on it and he's enjoying it and he wants to go out there and wreak havoc. And also his press conference, his persona and everything about him, it should have him being an absolute superstar when you're looking through his records.
Dave, I've got to interrupt you because we've got to move on. But listen, absolutely right. There is no way on earth that Tank Davis is performing to the best of his abilities at the moment. He's the only boxer of that kind of level who isn't within the diaspora of Turki Alalshikh and the whole movement in boxing at the moment. And obviously Al Heyman wants to keep him outside that. You're right in what you say. It's not good enough. And that's what we're basically saying. It's not good enough. We expect more of him. Do we expect more if we move to Belfast? Do we expect more of Marcus McDonnell? Was he near enough the boxers in the 8th round in that controversy where Paddy Donovan was comfortably ahead in his fight? He's beating up Lewis Crocker. He looked close to finishing him, and he's disqualified for throwing a punch after the bell. Was it the right call from Marcus McDonnell? And did Marcus McDonnell get himself in the right position, if I put it to you that way?
So firstly, that was completely a one-sided fight that I never expected. I thought it was a 50-50 tough fight. And it was completely one-sided. So people are forgetting just how good Donovan was in that fight. It was exceptional. When it comes to the fight, I felt as though the styles and the posture of both fighters was always going to bring these little bumps of the heads. Because Crocker was just literally hands up, leaning right forward all the time. In Donovan's style, yes, he's a boxer and normally a slick on the outside boxer, but he leans over his front foot. So as he's leaning over, and if he comes in to throw his little touches and his punches, his head's rocking forward as well. So we also add into the mix, always talk about Southpaw versus Orthodox, head clashes are quite common. I felt as though there was only one man that was getting spoken to and punished about head clashes. There was never anything towards Crocker about that, and I felt that was unfair, and I thought that was a little bit wrong.
Are you suggesting a bias here then, or not?
No, I'm not suggesting a bias. I'm just suggesting that either Marcus wasn't aware of the posture of Crocker, or he saw what he saw. He saw what he saw at the end of the day. But I feel as though both men could have been spoken to and just said, listen, lads, you keep bumping heads, just watch your heads, both of you. But it was only ever Paddy Donovan that was spoken to. So he gets 2 points taken off for that. The ending, Crocker's just been dropped. He's taken a beating all through the fight, and it's one of those where it's chipping away. First he looks strong, punches out of an effect, and then you start seeing the cumulative effects start having its effect on Crocker. So he's on the edge here. As a referee, you hear that klaxon. Once you hear that klaxon, you should be close to the action, especially when what you're watching is two fighters teeing off. Because at that point, Because at that point, Crocker's swinging as well, so you know they're exchanging as the bell's about to approach. So you should be closer. We've even seen where referees will lean into the fighters and say, "Stop at the bell, guys." They'll even give it, when they hear that 10 seconds, they'll tell them, "Stop at the bell, guys." So he should have been closer. He definitely, without a doubt, he should have been closer.
In my view, Marcus McDonnell was overzealous with his disqualification of Donovan. The fact that it was Andy Lee and Billy Nelson in opposition again, Martin Bacoli and Joseph Parker from a week ago. I think Billy Nelson says they move on and Crocker fights for a world title. That's not satisfactory for me. I think these two guys should have a rematch as well. It's completely wrong in my view. Billy Nelson says they'll look to fulfill the IBF title shot they've earned from this fight. Paddy and Eddie Hearn want the rematch next. I just don't. I don't agree with these things.
So where I am on this is I understand from Billy's point of view. His man's just literally got outclassed and battered in that fight. There's no two ways about it. He has got to make a hell of an adjustment in a rematch to try and beat Paddy Donovan. Then if he takes the immediate rematch, he's going to lose his world title shot. They're probably thinking, we'll sit there, get his world title shot, and then there's always the big money rematch that's going to sell a football stadium back in Ireland with Donovan. There's always that there. Win or lose the world title, there's always that there. So they're probably looking at it from a business point of view. From a fighter's point of view, and you've got to look, you've just got absolutely hammered all the way through. You've won on a DQ. You cannot claim that as a victory and then march off into a world title fight on the back of that. I think they should take the rematch, but business and common sense will say no, because you ain't beating Paddy Donovan, and then you're never going to get that world title fight. Yeah. So get the world title fight, see what happens, and I think that's what they're doing. I feel for Paddy Donovan, but his inexperience and youthful exuberance cost him. He had victory in his hand, and ultimately, whether we think it should have been a DQ, a warning, giving him 5 minutes, whatever, he put himself in a position where the referee, who had been on his back all night, had an option to disqualify him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's your view, and I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with what happened. I don't think he should fight for a world.
I'm not. My initial feeling was that it should be. It was harsh.
We've got to move on, Dave. Obviously, talkSPORT team are in Bournemouth on Saturday night. See Ryan Garner defeat Salvador Jimenez by a shutout. Terrific performance, and he will move further towards world level. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Still to come, we'll look at the latest fight announcement from the Ring magazine, which will take place in Times Square of all places. We'll look ahead to this week's fight between Tasha Jonas and Lauren Price too. Next up, though, we'll discuss Eubank Jr. versus Benn after a chaotic week of press conferences between the pair. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2 with me, Gareth and Davies, and him, Dave Coldwell. Lots to talk about. A mental week of press conferences in the last week, David, between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Are you a fan of this style of promotion?
Listen, it gets everybody talking about it.
Excited by it?
I was very excited. I was there. I was working for the first one. I was working for the Ring and the Sky feed. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't see it coming from Chris. I was expecting it coming from Conor. I'm looking when they come to face and the stage they're on. I'm thinking Conor's going to give me a double-handed push, and it's Chris. I was gobsmacked. Didn't see the egg at first. Didn't know it was the egg at first, and we just thought he'd given him a slap push over. And honestly, I've not seen anything as shocking as that because of who it was for a long, long time. But was it wrong? Yes. I don't believe you should put your hands on anybody, but it was good.
Exactly. I agree with you. I thought it was a disgrace. Eggy Hearn thought it was a disgrace, as I now call him. But for me, even though I don't agree with it like you, and I did call it a disgrace at the time in the moment, wow, we got some headlines from it, and wow, it led to real anticipation for that second press conference in London, didn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And the thing is, listen, let's be real. This fight is on and built because of characters. And characters are personalities, and the two personalities of the fathers, but the two personalities of the fighters. So it's not like a fight that's made on stacked records and what they've achieved. It's on characters, part pantomime, part just theatrical showbiz. So that fits in with it. So whatever goes really when it comes down to this fight. To be honest, you can't be all high and mighty when you look at the history of how this fight's come to be.
We'll talk about the detail here in a minute from the two press conferences, but the general consensus, and I agree with it, 2-10-8 rounds for Chris Eubank Jr., that he got the upper hand after winning. Do you feel as a fighter that getting the mental edge in a very big press conference like this does give you a slight advantage?
It depends if you're calm, cool, and collected or not. I don't think anything like that would affect Eubank whether he came up on top or not. He's very emotionless. Whereas with Conor, it does look as though he's hot-headed. It does get to him,
Emotional,
maybe
very emotional.
very, very much so.
The
So,
two
so
sons,
maybe
Dave,
it does affect
the
him.
two sons are almost like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They're so
Yeah,
similar to
definitely.
their fathers, aren't they?
But that's why it's actually really intriguing with the fight, because you can kind of like see how they are, and how the fight's going to evolve. One man's going to be like completely reckless and really going at it, and the other man's going to be a little bit calmer, a little bit cooler, and looking to make him punish his mistakes. Yeah, listen, it's all part of the circus that it is. So whether or not by the time it comes to fight week, it's that press conference where it might have an effect mentally, because we've got a long time to get over it, refocus, and it don't really mean anything.
Let's go over some of the details. Chris Eubank Jr. wanted to air grievances, notably towards Eddie Hearn, shut him down in the first press conference. Eddie, stop Eddie, blah, blah, blah. He controlled both press conferences, and he got some very big points out there. One which was the fighters who went into camp for the first event 2.5 years ago weren't compensated, and he's donating 50,000 towards them. He negotiated himself for his money. I'm estimating 10 million. He's calling it diabolical money he negotiated with Turkey. And he's also saying that Eddie was lying about the split 60-40. He aired all those grievances, and I think he came out as very powerful, David.
It did, but some of it was a little bit. Every fight that's ever been cancelled, every show that's ever been cancelled, nobody gets paid. It's just how it is. So if he wants to go and do that, that's great. But you can't make out as that he was making that as a point as though to dig at Eddie Hearn and the promotion. That's just not how it happens. In every fight there's ever been, the fight doesn't happen. You don't get paid. I've had fights where the fights have been cancelled. We've had camps. We've had life to pay for. Don't get nothing at the end of it. In terms of diabolical money, I think that's a bit of an insult with the money that they're getting for what he's achieved in his career. So he should be happy with the money that they're getting. And if he's managed to get a little bit more, then fair play, fair power to him. I haven't got anything against that. But don't call the money that's been on offer for the fight to be made originally or whatever as diabolical, because it's not. What was the other point?
Do you feel that because of the egg incident, because of the dramatic news stories, and it went to news and sport, that queue of 130,000 people for 70-odd thousand tickets at Spurs, did you expect it to sell out like that? And do you think, my view is it'll do 1 million on pay-per-view because it'll cross 3 generations. And I think this promotion is worth 30 million plus. And it's one of the biggest fights we've seen for a very, very long time outside the heavyweights.
I think in this day and age of social media and reels, clips, Instagrams, TikToks, I think this fight is going to be absolutely huge. The two characters, the way it's already started, we've got weeks before the fight. This fight is going to build and build and build for anticipation. And it's going to be a case of people that don't want to see it happen, even as it comes closer, they're going to be like, intrigued. The intriguement's going to get you. It's like a net. A net's being cast, and it's gonna gather all these people. And I agree with you. I think it's gonna smash box office records. I think it's gonna do really, really well. It really is, because of again, it's not about what these fighters have achieved. It's the characters. And you look in modern day boxing, sport, people watch characters. People sit and watch Kardashians. It's nothing anything special or spectacular or intelligent they're doing it. It's not quality, but they're drawn by characters. It's the same with your favourite TV programmes, whatever. Your favourite sportsman, it's characters.
Don't knock the Kardashians. I've watched 12 episodes on a very loose Sunday once.
It must have been loose.
I'm not a big watcher, but I did get into it. It was so addictive. I think I was ill.
Shut
I lay
up.
in bed and watched 12 episodes on one Sunday. That's the biggest admission that I've made for a very long time. But you're right. The thing is, as well, we both go back in the day and know their fathers. I mean, I know them personally. I worked on some of their fights. I've interviewed them. Chris Eubank Jr., Nigel Benn. Who's Fooling Who was the first promotion in 1990. Nigel Benn had knocked out Iran Barkley in a round. We didn't know how good Chris Eubank was going to be. And Chris Eubank Jr. used it on Thursday. Bloodbath is what their fathers had in that first fight. He's looking for a bloodbath again. History repeating itself. The bottom line, I've got to ask you this. Chris Eubank is naturally the bigger man. There's the moment in that Thursday press conference where Chris Eubank Jr. said, I felt your hand on my neck, senior. Ben, don't do that again or you'll lose your hand. And you saw the young man rise.
I didn't like that.
He was going to do it in 4 rounds. I still think Chris Eubank Jr. is a big favourite.
Do you know what? Right now, I haven't got a favourite. I think the bigger man should win, but the bigger man's he's not great himself. You know, when we talk about a good big and beats a good little one, listen, you've got to remember, Eubank's not great. And in his last fight, I thought he looked old. It's the first time I've looked at him.
In Riyadh, I agree with you. He got
Gareth, I thought he looked old.
Yeah.
I thought he looked old.
Yeah.
And if age is catching up on you, and listen, don't forget, his father has always banged on about him sparring heavyweights. When they were working together, and it was always talking about he spars heavyweights, he stands there as well. That shortens your lifespan in boxing. That has an effect. And if time has now come onto it, he's 35 years old. He's struggling to make the weight. Time comes onto you. You've got again. Ben might not be the biggest. Everybody makes that as though he's this huge puncher. He had a portion of his career where he didn't look like a huge puncher. He had a little window where all of a sudden he was a monster, and now he doesn't look like a big puncher again. So he's got the speed. He's got the ferociousness. Even though he's not a huge puncher, he could catch Eubank.
So you're edging towards Ben, and you don't want to commit yet, but that's okay.
I don't want to commit yet. I don't know.
I share all those thoughts, David, as well, because I think if Eubank has a hard weight cut, Ben could be dangerous early and be dangerous late if Eubank's exhausted. And Eubank seems to settle into a rhythm during fights. Whatever happens, we can't wait for it anyway, and we will be there at Spurs, packed out on April the 26th. And let's remind everyone, and we thank Turki Alalshikh and Ring Magazine for creating this event. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Next up, we'll talk about a huge fight announcement from the Ring Magazine again in Times Square. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2 with me, Gareth Davies, and him, Dave Coldwell. Outdoor card in Times Square, May the 2nd. What a spectacular venue, Mr. Coldwell. Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. First fight back for Garcia after his ban. Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. Haney stepping up to welterweight. And Tio Lopez versus Arnold Barboza Jr. Oh, what could have been for Jack Catterall had he beaten Barboza a few weeks ago. Sir, let's discuss. What a venue, first of all.
It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And do you know what? The iconic Ring Magazine putting on a show in Times Square, it just fits, and it's just spectacular. It really is. And do you know what? It was completely unexpected for me. I was like, wow, what? And then I've seen an image of how it looked like with the ring in Times Square. It just looks incredible. It really does. another unbelievable event that Turki Alalshikh and all the team are putting on. It's brilliant for boxing. It really is, and the eyes that are going to be on that, and the publicity that's going to generate for sport, incredible.
I mean, the optics are going to be amazing, as you say. Visual is going to be
Yeah.
spectacular. But when you hear him talk about he wants to do an event at Alcatraz or under the Eiffel Tower, I've suggested Stonehenge on a moonlit night, or just along the edge of the Thames, or with Tower Bridge in the background. Or there's so many that by the pyramids. I mean, I remember years ago, I think I was telling Addy this on one of the shows. I remember being in New York when the World Squash Championships had the World Championships underneath Grand Central Station with a clear court that the players couldn't see out of, but all the commuters could look in and watch the games going on. Obviously, you couldn't do that with boxing, but this is the equivalent of that. We've all been to Times Square, and what I like is that before we go on to the fights themselves, that they're stepping outside the box to do things differently. And I think at a time when our sport is really prevalent in the news, doing this just takes it to another level.
Yeah, and it just seems as though there's no boundaries to what their imagination is, and that's what it is. Listen, you can have imagination, but when you've got the financial power to make it happen and turn it into reality, that's when it goes another gear. And we're just in a really good spot with boxing, and we're quite fortunate that we have got somebody that is a huge boxing fan that does have these crazy ideas that you seem crazy and not doable, but he can make it happen.
Let's go to the fights. I'm sure they'll add more fights. I can't believe it's only going to be 3 fights outdoors. How do they do the seating? How do you get a ticket for it? How do you get a hotel overlooking it? That's the other thing. Get a hotel room overlooking it with a window that opens. Do you know what I mean?
You need to book now. That's what you need to do. Book now, because they will go
now,
in no time.
That's it. 2 words. Book now.
I am intrigued in how they're going to do the tickets. It's going to be a strange one. But information will come out, and obviously they'll be planning that now.
I've seen the bleachers put up there before for other events that have been there outside Good Morning America, where the great TV show is there. I think there's going to be the capacity probably for a couple of thousand, I imagine, and that'll be it, because they'll build the banks up around it. It's very easy to hone off, I would say, unless you're sitting in one of those buildings there and in the window. Let's go to the fights. Ryan Garcia against Rolly Romero, Devin Haney against Jose Ramirez. Expect the unexpected in boxing, but these are semi-finals to try and get Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney against each other again. Do you think that will happen, or could we see an upset here, or even 2 upsets?
No, I do think that plan will come to fruition, to be honest. Listen, it's good fights. Rolly Romero is exciting. He's a little firecracker. But yeah, I would imagine the fights will go the way that we expect. Devin Haney, he'll just put on a boxing clinic. It'd be interesting him up at welterweight. Will be interesting. I know he looks like he's boiled himself down to 140. How he even did below that, I'll never know. But at 140, it looked rough at the weigh-ins. So he'll feel more energy. Maybe it'll make him do more in fights. So it could be a very good move for him.
And obviously, as well, looking ahead, it appears that Haney and Garcia will probably meet at welterweight, which is probably the right weight, certainly for Ramirez. For Garcia, because he was struggling to make 140.
Yeah.
But look, the first fight's been expunged, but mentally, will Devin Haney ever be able to forget being knocked down and knocked down and knocked down by Ryan Garcia?
Yeah, that was quite a one-sided, brutal beating he took there. It's not like it was just little flash knockdowns. They were heavy, and he really did get a job done on him. So, like you said, for somebody who is all about hitting, not getting hit anyway, and safety, does it make him even more, safe conscious? Does he want to be even more negative in his boxing, just pinch wins? Going into a rematch, there's a big thing when you fight somebody and you get wiped out by him, that's bad enough. But then also there becomes, when you find out they failed a drugs test, you can pin yourself on that's the only reason that he was so strong. It was, it was so powerful, and that can give you the confidence to rebuild, sort of thing, to go in. But ultimately, we'll not know until until he gets hit again by Garcia. How does the effect, what does the effect have on him?
I cannot wait for the rematch between them. Win or lose, I want to see them fight next against each other, regardless of the outcome, because I just think there's so much heat under that fight. I just hope Garcia's in the right place. I mean, he's already started putting things out like, if I was on steroids, why am I not
Yeah,
lumpining?
yeah.
It's obviously come back to slightly haunt him in a certain way. Teo Lopez, before we move to the last section of the day. Teo Lopez, Arnold Barboza. Barboza showed some great qualities against Jack Catterall, who, let's not forget, wasn't beaten in the first fight by, in many of our views, by the undisputed champion at 10 stone, Josh Taylor. He earned his rematch. He earned a victory in the rematch. He earned the victory over Regis Prograis. He got a razor-tight decision against Barboza. Barboza is, I think, formidable, just based on that. But Teo Lopez, for me, two of the best victories, I think, Vasyl Lomachenko, and who else am I thinking he beat? Josh Taylor, in formidable style. Teo Lopez, for me, is top 10 pound for pound, David.
Oh, I don't know if he's top 10,
For me.
because he's very hot and cold. He's very hot and cold. He is hot and cold. He's another one. He's another one who had all the potential, and we thought he was going to go on to do great things. And for me, again, he's never reached the heights that I thought he was going to. But in Barboza, he's fighting a very clever man, very caged. He can be caged. We saw against Catterall, he didn't fall into Jack's traps. Jack was wanting him to fall into traps, and he wouldn't. He refused. Very patient, very clever. But if Lopez is on form, and he should be in that setting, that's going to be amazing for him. He's going to really thrive off that. And if Lopez is on form, I expect him to do a job, and I think he could look good in that fight as well.
So, what do you think about the fact that Lopez is on this card? For me, if Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia loses, he could be the guy that fights the winner of those. And I love that. And he moves up to welterweight to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's very doable, and he's a big enough name, and
he's a big
you
enough
wouldn't mind any
specimen to do welterweight as well.
I think so. He's another guy that's massive in between. You go over to America, and these guys that are boxing at a certain weight, that when they're in between fights, you see how much weight they put on. They're absolute beasts. They have to work so hard to get down in weight.
Indeed. Well, that's exciting. May the 2nd, Lopez, Garcia, and Haney all on that Times Square card. Be there or be Times Square. Never mind. You're listening to Fight Night on talkSPORT 2. Next, we'll talk this weekend's action. It's actually Friday night at the Albert Hall as Tasha Jonas and Lauren Price fight for the unified welterweight world titles. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2 with me, Gareth Davies, and I'm delighted to say that Dave Coldwell is with me today in the studio for Fight Night Extra. He's been brilliant as always. This weekend, or this Friday night, David, Natasha Jonas versus Lauren Price, the WBC, WB and IBF welterweight world titles on the line. For the winner, I think an undisputed title fight with the winner of Michaela Mayer and Sandy Ryan, who go at it later in the month for the WBO title. Obviously, Paintgate notwithstanding, the paint that went over Sandy Ryan, the heat that's under that one. We've obviously had Jonas against Mayer before, but for me, on this 6 women card at the Albert Hall, 6 women boxing match card on the Albert Hall, it's a moment in time again. We've had this once before, but this is the best all-British female matchup I think we've ever had.
Oh, it's outstanding. Natasha Jonas and Price is going to be. Listen, I get the feeling as soon as I saw this made. Obviously, they were pushing for it, and Boxer built Lauren Price to be the next star of the female sport, and I think for what Tasha Jonas has done, achieved, and throughout her whole career, and the fights that she's been involved with, I feel that she feels a little bit disrespected, and she's got the fire lit up underneath her on this one, and it's just going to make for such a great fight, because you've got the young gun that thinks that she's already there and thinks that this is just a walk in the park, really. And then you've got the one that's been there, done it, bought the t-shirt, that's thinking,
In three
do you
weight
know what?
divisions. In three weight
Yes.
divisions.
And she's fought real fighters. She's had real fights. She's been exciting. She's been the underdog. She's done it all. And has she got one more left in her? Because she's getting old. But she needs to be at her best. But she's been written off by a lot of people.
For me, I do think Price is the favourite, even in spite of all the things you say about the skills of Natasha Jonas, who is now.
But what do you base that on?
She's 41 in June, but she's got better through her late 30s. Look, Jonas, they're both southpaws. Price switches a bit more. I had doubts about Price because of the lack of power she showed in some of her fights, but she's shown it in the last couple. She's planting her feet more. Those 10 2-minute rounds, David, pass so quickly when you've got all-out action, and they're both fighters who like to give all-out action. I just shade it towards the Olympic champion Price, her youthfulness and verve. Even though Natasha shows no signs of slowing, I just feel that I had both of them on talkSPORT with me one night, and they went at it. And Natasha made the mistake of thinking she'd sparred with Price before.
Yeah.
I don't remember if you remember this clip. And she said, no, that was a different Price. That was someone else. That wasn't me. So I don't know if I agree with you that Price is underestimating Jonas. I just think that Price is a special sports person, in spite of the fact Jonas is our most decorated British female boxer of all time. You go back to the Olympic semi-final with Katie Taylor, the pro fight with Katie Taylor, the ups and downs, light middleweight, all the way down to super featherweight, I think it is. She's an extraordinary character, and I wouldn't doubt her. But at the moment, I'm just shading towards Price.
And is that based on youth?
Yeah, youth and hand speed.
So I agree with you on the fact that if you're going to base it on if you're looking at the stages they are in their careers now, youthfulness and the sharpness of Lauren Price should see her win this fight. But if I look at it on what have you actually done in the pro game, and Tasha's not shown any signs of decline. Like she doesn't look like she's there yet. So because of that, because of her experience in a dogfight, because of her smarts, and because of the whole emotion of how she feels about this fight, and with what's going on with Joe at the moment as well, I think they're going to pull it off. You mentioned Joe there, Joe Gallagher, and our love and praise to Joe, who of course is fighting fourth stage 4 cancer at the moment, and we send him all our love and prayers, and he's battling it in an amazing way. I don't disagree with you on that. Also on the cards, Caroline Dubois, Bomi Ray Shin, WBC World Lightweight title, Karis Artinstall against Raven Chapman. These are all 10-2s, by the way. Chloe Watson against Jasmina Zataposhna. Cindy Nagamba against Kirsty Bavington. Big fan of Kirsty myself. And Fran Hennessy, 5-0, maybe one of the coming forces, against Carla Camila Campos Gonzalez. What do you think of my Spanish accent? Not really, because I saw you giggling then. But also, I'm a Spanish speaker. But also, this is a very clever card in an amazing venue. And as Price herself said, I went there to look at it for the first time at the press conference, and I was absolutely overawed. It brings the best out in people, the Albert Hall, doesn't it? Yeah, there's been some great nights there. Plenty of years ago as well. It's historic, and the setting is fantastic. The card itself is very, very good. It's Raven Chapman and Carrie Arsenal is a really good
It
fight.
is.
A really good fight. I'm
Yeah.
intrigued. That for me on the undercard is the pick of the undercard.
Of course,
Chloe
that's
Watson
Lauren, we
and
must add that's Lauren Price's partner as well, isn't it? So
yeah. But that's a good fight. I forget how to Yasmin. I know Yasmin because she used to come down and spar Ebony when I worked with Ebony. Her against Chloe Watson's a very good fight because Yasmin can fight as well, and she's coming off a good run as well. So there's a couple of good, interesting fights there that I'm interested in. But yeah, Raven Chapman and Carrie Arsenal's the one for me on the undercard.
absolutely, and let's not forget the name of Dubois, Caroline Dubois.
Of course, yeah, and I think she's the next superstar of the female sport. I really do. I think she'll end up cleaning up in that division.
That's Friday night on Sky, of course, from the Albert Hall. Last thing today, Ben Whittaker has teamed up with Andy Lee, trainer of Joe Parker and Paddy Donovan, for his rematch with Liam Cameron.
Good move.
What do you think of that, Dave Coldwell?
Good move. Very good move. Now, it's only a good move if he throws himself into it, keeps his mouth shut and listens. If he does that, that's a really good move. But I'm going to tell you, I've had Stephen Cairns sparring Dalton Smith up at Steel City Gym with Grant. And I've seen Liam Cameron. I've been watching Liam Cameron while he's been training alongside. Mate, he looks good. He looks good. And I thought he did a job on Ben Whittaker last time out. And do you know what? I fancy him to do it again.
I sat with Liam at the Riyadh show in February, right next to him during the live talkSPORT broadcast, and his skin and his visage and his outward appearance, and forget the kind of trampish beard. I'm saying all of this out of respect for Liam because he knows how much we love him on. He knows how much we love him on Fight Night because when he was in the wilderness, we wanted to put his story out there as well about being banned from boxing for recreational drugs, and we did his story writ large. And the shaggy beard and the gap tooth smile, but up close, and the hat, and he likes to kind of give it the street look. He's very, very healthy when you're up close with him. His skin is glowing. He would look 25 if he had a shave. He's a great character, but Andy Lee is a very special man. I've just done a big story on him and Joseph Parker for the Ring magazine, for next month's Ring magazine, in which Andy Lee is telling me, David, how in the last 9 fights with Joseph Parker, he feels he's grown as a coach and a man as well, while Joseph Parker's grown. And they've actually had this synergetic relationship, this marriage, if you like, that's taken them to a new place where they did believe certain things, and now they know the things they believed are right. So that's fascinating as well. Like you say, if Ben Whittaker is eyes and ears with Andy Lee and doesn't do too much showbiz when he's around him, I think it will make a huge difference. You are spot on. You're always spot on. It's been brilliant having you on the show today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Big thanks to Dave, as always. Well, not as always, but as always when he does come on. Remember, if you missed any of this show, you can listen to it as a podcast. Find it under the Fight Night banner on the talkSPORT app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts from. We'll be back with you next week.